Thanks, everyone. Hi, I'm Adi. I lead marketing at hosted.ai. I have with me four guys here. They're the four co-founders of hosted.ai. And yeah, guys, I think we'll just keep it unfiltered. We'll just keep it very natural, and we'll start with Naren. So my question to you, we'll just go around and do a quick fire intro. Naren, the questions stay the same, which is, who are you? What do you do at hosted.ai?
My name is Naren Shankar. I'm one of the co-founders, and I'm in charge of all things commercial at hosted.ai.
So I'm James Whittle, COO at hosted.ai.
Yeah, Julian Chesterfield. I'm co-founder and CTO of Hosted, and it's a fantastic, exciting journey that we've been on. It's great that we're here.
Yeah, so I'm Ditlev, and also one of the founders here. And we've worked together for, 100 years now. James and I think for 22, 25 years, something like that, right? And the rest of us for like 15 years or something like that, right? And I've always been in the hosting industry, either on the hardware data center side or on the software side. The last sort of 15 years on the software side.
Cool. I think Ditlev, I think in his intro, he also touched upon how you guys know each other for 20 years, I think, James. And I think maybe, why don't we go there, right? Maybe let's trace the origin story, right?
It's a really good journey, right? We took UK2. I didn't found it. I took it over when there were like, less than, like 5-6 people or something in the company, right? And we grew it organically. It was also a great time to do it, right? We grew it organically to a few hundred people and, up towards 100 million of revenue, and we made a bunch of acquisitions, and James, you ended up running almost half the team or something, right? I mean, you certainly had a big impact on the whole journey.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great experience to be in each and every kind of area of being a hoster, right? And we were pretty much your kind of traditional hoster. We were involved into shared hosting, we were involved into domains, we were involved into email, and that was always the biggest headache. A lot of dedicated servers, and then we kind of gradually flowed through into this world of virtualization.
And we built our own data centers, we built our own platforms, and we built a brand in there called VPS.net, which kind of took us to the cloud era, right?
Yeah. I don't remember the first time I met these two guys specifically. I remember the first time I knew about Julian.
Seems like a story.
Yeah. Well, so Ditlev and I, we had this nice office. We had these big orange sofas where we used to just hang out, and when we weren't doing some real work, we were sitting there and chatting or whatever. And he hands me a CV and says, "Hey, this guy looks good." And I said, "He looks great, but there's no way we can ever afford a guy like that." And then, sometime later, somehow, Ditlev managed to bring you on board.
Yeah, it was really good.
And that was awesome.
Came to meet you guys. That was the first time I met you.
Yeah.
I remember you were, I think we were the only support guy there, because you were kind of leaving, you were sort of creating a team.
We were just building a team up.
Just getting started. Anyway, so I came in, and we wanted to build a storage technology. Ditlev said, sheepdog.
I found the Fuji guys.
Yeah,
Fuji Labs. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember that. But then we pretty quickly, soon after that, decided we were going to build our own.
I think for the uninitiated person, just randomly screaming sheepdog. Sounded a little bit weird. Sheepdog was an open source project.
It was a storage technology.
Exactly.
But I remember, we set up Cambridge office soon after that. And Ditlev we would find an excuse to say, let's go up to Cambridge to, we'd go punting.
We go punting, exactly. Do you guys know what punting is?
Yeah.
So, going on the river and...
Yep.
Exactly.
But we did other work.
Out punting, yeah.
Ross punting and drinking a few beers.
It was good days. Yeah, and then Naren, I think, first time we met, I guess, I think you were on board for a while before we probably met.
And
you were California based. But I think probably when you came over to the UK.
one of those trips, yep.
That's not real about all the internet stuff.
Yep.
This was during the ONAP days.
Yes.
So Naren was at VMware, right?
That's a good seg. Yeah, so I was at VMware. My job at VMware was very simple, which is take a very, very, very successful enterprise stack and make it ready for service providers. And it took a good 3-4 years, and we still had a bad product. And the product as such, the technology was fine, but I think the interface, the presentation, like, the user interface, the user experience, and even, of course, some core underlying technologies as well was not really, it was not up to the mark for service providers. So we spent a lot of time building it internally, and then at some point you realize you can't, like, fit a, what do you call it, like a square peg in a round hole, and that's when I said, what, let's actually start a partner program where we identified all the gaps in the product portfolio. And one of the big gaps, as I was talking to various partners, that's when I met Ditlev. And to be honest, when I saw the on-app product, I was wowed. I was like, wow, okay, this is really how a slick service provider interface, end user interface should look like. And then I brought them onto the program. And I think we were partners for a while. Right? In fact, I think we had invited Ditlev to speak at VMworld. VMworld is VMware's marquee conference, and Ditlev came, spoke, and I think it was very, very well received. And at that time, at some point, like, you also look at it and say, a cool company like this, should I partner from the outside or actually join forces? And and Ditlev and I had a chat, and the only thing, my only condition for Ditlev was I need a cool title of president, which he very glad. He said president doesn't make any sense in the UK anyway, so you can have it.
That was such a weird conversation.
Yeah, it's like, because in America you have, like, I was kind of at like a director becoming a vice president. You have like vice president, senior vice. I said, what, let me go for the top and say president. That's it. No, whatever it was, a very, it was just a very silly fun.
I didn't care.
Yeah,
Whatever, man.
president or janitor, whatever it was. I was like, but honestly, for me, the vision of the company, I think what I saw in service provider land, which ONAP was addressing, and more importantly, I think we'd also started the partnership with VMware. I think I also saw it as an opportunity to, like, grow it and also essentially have ONAP, be more, let's call it as like an offering that VMware would offer as part of that. In fact, it took us a good year and a half to get to that point, but eventually, ONAP became the first third-party product that was sold on VMware's price books.
But it's a good case, right? Because it really shows that with all the money, all the resources, all the people, and all the smartness, because they're super smart guys inside VMware, even with all that, they couldn't penetrate the
service provider space. It's I think a lot of it probably had got to do with all the learnings and the DNA that you all had built at UK2, right? I think you'd actually been, when you are a service provider, you really know what a service provider wants. I think at VMware, it's like, enterprise product folks, enterprise sales folks trying to engineer and find out what a service provider needs. It was not that straightforward, and I think the same story is true even now. There's many enterprise companies, enterprise products trying to enter the service provider space. It's a very different DNA. It's a very different set of requirements that they have, and it actually takes quite a bit of, let's call it as, deep expertise to build products that really suit service providers, right? And as far as coming to hosted AI, I think after ONAP we all went our ways, and I was at Expedia. Expedia, my job description was build the infrastructure for Gen AI for Expedia. Again, back to servers, back to, and that's when I started researching what it would cost to bring GPUs to Expedia. And Expedia, in fact, is probably one of the largest customers of AWS, right? So in fact, AWS has an acronym. It's in the public domain. They call it NICE, which is Nike, Intuit, Capital One, and Expedia, 4 of the largest spenders on AWS. And even with that large spend, when I wanted to bring GPUs in the mix, it took the bill up by 20%, right? And that's when, I was just chatting with Ditlev, and somehow we also kind of like got to that point where we said, what we saw in cloud is probably what's happening here in AI. And I requested him to see other service providers that he knows who are offering GPUs. I think we didn't find too many, and then that kind of led to an aha moment where we said, let's see if this makes sense. And then maybe this is a good segue to you, Ditlev, too.
This is my 7th startup, and I've gone down twice in my 20s, like really down, losing everything I had, and I had a bunch of exits since then. And it's the first time I have 2 co-founders, and it's like night and day. It's fantastic to have someone to cry with, someone to laugh with, someone to go through all the troubles, and because running a business can be quite a lonely thing, and it's been a fantastic experience. Frankly, working with all of you has been awesome. So yeah, we've been working together for so many years, and working remotely, if it was a new team, would be really hard. But because we spent probably way too much time together already in the same room, this has been natural. It's like after the first few interactions, it was, okay, let's just get on to work. Let's just get cracking. We didn't need that half year of sort of tuning into each other and getting started. So it's been really good.
What's your process of, creating one startup after the other, right? Like for some people, they spend their all their lives thinking about starting up. For some people, they're still seeing through the first one. What's driving you to, to keep starting one after the other? And by the way, I mean also having successful exits. It's one thing to, just start and run it as a hobby business in your backyard, but it's one thing to, really go take it to markets.
Yeah, we've had a bunch of good exits, and I think so what it takes, right? There's so many ways of looking at this, and if you look at the LinkedIn feeds, you see all these, this is the top 10 things you have to do, and sit down and make plans and write goals and all that shit, right? And for me, it's always been the opposite. It's about finding a problem that's big enough, and we've certainly done that at hosted.ai, but finding a problem that's big enough and then finding the right team to solve it. And actually, before doing that, before finding the team, figuring out if there is a better place, a better entity to solve that problem than within a new organization. Mm-hmm. Is there a company somewhere already doing something similar? And in that case, don't try to build it, just join that company. Look at this company and say, oh, I can see you guys are doing something similar. Like, for example, if VMware, in their wisdom, were trying to virtualize the GPUs just like they did to the CPUs, we wouldn't have built this.
Yeah.
Because we would realize, hey, they're probably going to pull it off. And we may just go to them and say, hey, VMware, we worked great back in the 2000s.
Yes.
Why don't we do it again for the service provider space? Now, they didn't do that, so we decided to form hosted.ai. But it's really about the problem, and it's not about, frankly, it's not about the exit. If you think about an exit, you will never have one. Yeah. It's not about the millions. If you think about making millions, you'll never make them. It's about finding the problem and finding the team to solve it. And so there's no playbook, there's no replicable kind of, at least not to me. I know to some people there might be, but to me, there isn't. I remember when I was younger, maybe I did do that, actually. Maybe I did mirror decisions inside the company into what would it look like to an exit. But then you find all these different exit paths, and none of them have the same decision allocated to each of these paths. So it's better just to look at, hey, how can I just build an awesome company? How can I solve some big problems? And then just...
You can't really control the exit here.
At least if you try, it's rarely working out, right?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think now is a good, I would say, inflection point for us to really, get into hosted.ai and also talk a bit about the market that we are trying to, serve. And I think both Ditlev, you and I think Naren also made this point of, that how back when you started in your maybe on-app days and even before, right? Like how there was really a software missing, which was also focusing on cloud service providers and still being, streamlined in terms of the experience. I want to, slightly compare that time with the time now, right? Like, for example, how does today's everyone into GPUs moment compare to when providers were scrambling for cloud 15 years ago? I mean, I'm sure that there are some parallels, there are some things which are entirely different. But looking back, does anything come into your mind? Any four of you, anyone could start.
Well, I can start. I mean, when we built UK2 back in the days, we built it actually before VMware, before Zen, and before KVM, and before anyone were virtualizing servers. And you were looking at these dedicated servers. You kind of had two choices. Either you had a shared hosting account, shared a server with 1,000 others, with no kind of policing or enforcing of resource allocation, or you had a full dedicated server. There was nothing in between. And then suddenly VMware came, then Zen and KVM came, and made it possible for you to have kind of infinite number of servers across your infrastructure. And that was the foundation of the cloud. And everything kind of just blew up. And by the way, also as a service provider back then, suddenly your revenue was multiplied, but more importantly, your profit just went bananas. Because suddenly your utilization rate of this infrastructure, your return on the capex that you've invested, completely different. And so that was one thing. The second thing was the ease of use. Suddenly there was orchestration platforms that everyone could just point and click and then get resources served to them. Enterprises, SME, SOHOs, and so on. And that was another huge inflection point, right? And you can say, and also like you spoke about before, how these enterprise players trying to enter the market and frankly failing, right? We had a huge opportunity back when we built VPS.net back in UK2 group and taking the technology, transforming it into one app, and then effectively being part of the whole cloud wave. We're seeing the same thing now. There's like two major trends, right? Number one, the guys that have deployed the neoclouds, and frankly also the GPU wave within the hyperscalers as well, is done in the enterprise way. So it's done just like you were selling dedicated servers back in 2002, 2003. So either you buy 1 card or you buy 8 cards. What if you need half a card today, 1.5 cards tomorrow, and then 10 cards the day after, and then back to 1 card afterwards? That is what VMware did to the dedicated server, and no one is doing that to the GPU. So that's one thing. The second thing, it's super hard to deploy, it's super hard to manage. There's no easy-to-use orchestration platform. And if you are Soho or SME or anyone who is not super enterprise with a team of developers, managing your AI infrastructure is quite a cumbersome task. So those are the 2 things that we wanted to solve. Number 1, building a platform where it's really easy for service providers to get live and for their end users to actually consume the infrastructure. In this case, infrastructure would be GPUs mostly, right? And number 2, making it super profitable for those service providers, and frankly also cheaper for the end users to deploy and sell that infrastructure. So we deployed hosted AI, where you can say ONAP, we've spoke about ONAP before, was a cloud in a box. Hosted AI is a neocloud in a box. Make it super easy for service providers to deploy their AI infrastructure, and then even more importantly, making it super profitable for them. Because we are able to virtualize, just like VMware did for the CPU, we are able to virtualize the GPU, slice it up, and make it flexible, make the workloads fit where they fit best, rather than necessarily be tied to physical infrastructure across your servers. So it's completely the same story as it was back in, and also in ONAP, we had a bunch of competitors. I launched ONAP the same day as OpenStack was announced. It was not a good day. We just raised $9 million, and then I was on stage, I remember, and half an hour before me, the NASA guys were standing there together with the Rackspace guys saying, no one is ever going to pay for orchestration of cloud infrastructure again. And then half an hour later, I was there saying, hey, please buy my orchestration platform, right? It was not good. This is a completely different situation because right now, frankly, we're the only game in town. Yeah. We are the only one who's managed to build a turnkey platform. Sure, there are frameworks out there, but we're the only turnkey platform in town. And number 2, we're the only one who's built a meaningful, scalable way of virtualizing and sharing GPUs. And so it's a super interesting time. And actually, bringing it back to the days of 2002, 2003 is completely correct because it's the same inflection point. It's the same paradigm shift you have, where the cloud wave came and now we are in an AI wave, and the challenges are the same. And the players, the neoclouds of today, they solve it just like the same way that the enterprise players were trying to solve it back in the early 2000s.
Absolutely.
Without looking at the price level for the end users and without looking at the orchestration ease of use from the service provider.
Yeah. In fact, that's one point where I want Naren, you also to come in terms of how do you look at this from a financial engineering model point of view, right? So
it's a great question, right? So most neoclouds, I mean, I see like 2 origins, right? One is essentially Bitcoin miners who've turned spare GPU capacity because Bitcoin moved from GPUs to ASICs. And they had all these GPUs lying around, and then when ChatGPT came along, everybody was like, okay, I need some GPUs to run stuff on. And all these Bitcoin miners started becoming neoclouds. So that's one side. The second side is people whom I call as they've been playing the financial engineering game, right? Which is, it's very simple. On one end, you buy or lease GPUs, and there is a monthly mortgage payment. I mean, in India, you call it EMI, right? I mean, there's a monthly payment that you make. And on the other end, you sell the GPUs that you have to the market and you get some rental income, right? I think when Ditlev and I, we started talking in early 2024, like an A100 was renting for $6 an hour, right? Today, if you go to rent an A100, it's probably under $1. So the rental, I mean, if you had built a business based on A100s, your rental income would have dropped 6 times, but you're still probably paying the same mortgage on these GPUs. And at some point, right, you hit this wall where you really are not making money. And yeah, so this is a real problem in the neocloud industry. In fact, I think when we started, it was a hypothesis that we had. Last night, we had dinner with a gentleman who was here in the Indian ecosystem, and he just told us that India's largest neocloud had their CFO resign because they were having problems making payments. So it's a very real problem, and I think, it really boils down to 2 things, right? Like Ditlev said, one is create a neocloud platform that actually lets these neoclouds be profitable. And 2 is create a platform that lets them compete in a better manner, right? Like, I mean, we believe that with hosted AI, a service provider can actually be profitable and at the same time also create an offering which is probably more competitive than what's there in the market, right? I mean, if say somebody's offering a B200 at like $6 an hour, with hosted AI, you could probably offer it at like $4, $5, even $3, and and make more money in the process too, right? So yeah, it's a great time to be in this industry. And I think to what Ditlev said earlier, there's not too many players out there who are doing what we are doing. In fact, I don't think there's any player who's actually doing what we are doing. And yeah,
No, that makes quite a bit of sense. I want to come to you, Julian, on the the entire product piece of itself, right? Because I think you've been in the industry for the longest time. Also, virtualizing. Like earlier it was CPUs, now it's GPUs, and my question to you more is like when it comes to virtualizing compute in general, right? Like I think it's one of the most rinsed and repeated things. Like I think there's enough which is already done, right? But what's unique and still unsolved about virtualizing GPU especially is something that I want to know from you.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to forget that, because there are a lot of technologies that are in the public domain that people just use and just take it and use them, right? But that initial, back when we were building Zen, and this is the same for VMware and other folks who works on these core virtualization technologies. Actually, creating the ability to virtualize was a difficult process. To actually the goal on the technological side was to build efficiency, right? You wanted to efficiently. We had smart schedulers that would track how busy the workloads were and sort of scheduling tasks to run across different CPU cores and so on to sort of do this Tetris thing of, fitting workloads onto the most efficient way possible at runtime, right, as they were executed. And it took us years to get to the sort of maturity level we have today. I mean, back then the CPUs from Intel and AMD didn't have extensions to support virtualization, so we had to do all software. And we helped those guys design the hardware to support and optimize virtualization over the years. And now, of course, a lot of this stuff just runs natively, and people take it for granted how it happens, right? The GPU space is very much, I see a lot of analogies to what we saw back then. It's like it's hard to do it. It's hard to do it properly, but at least I think we see exactly the same traits, which is that workloads running on GPUs do not utilize the GPUs that efficiently. There's a lot of idle time across the GPUs. They're sitting there waiting to process workloads, and having that ability to deploy workloads much more efficiently across the physical GPUs, and to be able to schedule across GPUs is really the key thing, and that's what we're focused on.
Are there any breakthroughs in terms of that you see coming in this space?
I think the industry will evolve in many ways. It will just grow out in many ways. I think we're starting to see more hardware players coming onto the scene. We announced a partnership with Furiosa. There are many other hardware players as well who are bringing new and interesting acceleration technologies to the market. So we'll see that space from a hardware level just become more and more competitive, I think. Power efficiency is one of the areas that, for me, I think we'll see some innovations in that space. And also, I would like to think, just like we did with CPU vendors, I would like to think that we'll start to see capabilities coming into the hardware itself in order to more efficiently support virtualization. Because, that would be a huge breakthrough for all of us. There's a sort of inflection point, I think, where the hardware vendors accept that they can't control everything in the market, and they have to accept that virtualization is a fake. That happened in the hardware space for CPU vendors, and I think that will happen. So,
when James and I were selling dedicated servers back in 2000, 2002, 2003, whatever it was, our customers cared about the CPU. So they wanted this specific CPU with that specific setup and this, and so on and so on. Today, if you go to Amazon or if you go to DigitalOcean and you buy an instance or a droplet or whatever they call it, you have no idea what CPU sits underneath because it's all been commoditized. It's all normalized. It's just normalized into compute power and memory, which effectively is what a GPU is as well. And at some stage very soon, we'll get to the same point. That's one of our core theses, is that it will all be normalized. It will all be normalized into compute and VRAM. You can discuss whether tokens will be the currency or not, but it will all be normalized into compute across variables, across AMD, across NVIDIA.
I think we're helping to normalize.
Oh,
it as
definitely.
well, because today that doesn't exist. You rent a particular card or a slice of a card, and that's it. You know exactly what you're getting. You know the type, the memory size, the performance capability of that card. But as you say, the software applications have a performance envelope that they have to hit. Beyond that, they don't really care. Right? And I think that's where the normalization will really come into play.
But it's also like the whole industry, the service provider industry now launching AI, have forgotten this sort of core values of how this stuff is done. The way that the service provider industry makes money is by overselling, and that is not a bad word. It's a little bit like when you go to your gym, you have 1,000 members, but 50 machines, because the gym knows that only 50 people will turn up at the same time. That's cool. If you manage it, properly, sustainably, it's all good. But for GPUs, they decided to have one dedicated card, and when the user who bought that card is not using it, it's just sitting idle there, burning power. It's bad for the environment and for the green perspective, but certainly even worse for your capex. And as a service provider, it's really hard to make money that way. Yeah. And the rest of the service provider industry, the CPU, the memory, the data centers, the power, certainly the bandwidth, the storage is oversold like crazy. But this GPU is just sitting there at 10-20%, roaming along, and that GPU is probably, especially on a weight to dollar credit, is the most expensive part you have across your whole data center, and also the highest scarcity across it's basically the scarcity that actually holds back the evolution of AI, and then here it is sitting there at 10-20% utilization, and that's one of the problems that you guys solved in Zen for the CPU, and that's what we are solving for the GPU.
Oh, that makes sense. I love that example of a gym with oversubscription. James, I want to come to you on this, and you have been in the industry for quite some time, right? Speaking to service providers. And I think not just speaking, I mean, you've been in the operating trenches with them, right? Like ensuring that, day-to-day SLAs are met and stuff like that. How does the service provider industry see this, what you are trying to solve at hosted.ai? And again, I mean, when you speak to them, are there, do you hear the same things? Like, are there any challenges that they speak about? Like, how do you maneuver around that? Yeah.
So I think for service providers, there's always kind of similar challenges that come up whenever new products come into the market, right? So we kind of end up in this situation where service providers have fairly commoditized stuff that they know how to sell, that they've been selling for years, but everyone's selling it, right? So they need to find how to differentiate themselves. With the commoditized stuff, that becomes super expensive, but there's always this opportunity before commoditization happens, where they have an ability to kind of get first mover advantage, where they have an ability to kind of get into new customers before their competitors do so. And I think we kind of at that moment with GPU at the moment, right? We see some regions are more advanced than others, but there's still many kind of untapped markets, particularly when we start to talk about the non-full card approach, right? Full card approach is still it's still kind of untapped in a lot of areas, but we see it kind of happening at different paces globally. I think for service providers, getting the confidence to know that they can sell these services, to know the market demand is there, and I think as we start to move from more training towards more inference, I think that will kind of de-risk for service providers that investment. Obviously, buying GPUs is more expensive than buying servers, which they've been buying for the many years, right? So the investment is bigger, the risk is bigger, but the rewards are also potentially substantially bigger there. So I think there's kind of two pieces to it. One is being able to differentiate. Once that commoditization happens for software for service providers, and we are part of the problem, right? Historically, we are building software for service providers that makes it super easy for service providers to do something, build a cloud in a box. Now, GPU kind of service offering in a box. So we need to build products that allow to differentiate, right? So we need to build products that allow the service provider to not just sell the same thing in the same way as someone else, but be cheaper or faster, but allow them to kind of wrap services on top, or to be able to build products in different ways, or to be able to bill in different ways, to be able to take what they have and to be able to kind of package it up in various ways. And I think that's the piece that big enterprise software solutions often don't get. Right? We have to add a lot of complexity into our products to make the service offering customizable, but we have to keep the end user experience super simple. So the service provider needs to take on the complexity. The end user still needs to get that super simple, easy to use solution at the end.
And service providers are super conservative, right?
Yeah.
Because they have the livelihood of all their customers in their hands. If a service provider goes down, it's someone's web shop, it's someone's agency, it's someone's livelihood that is actually going down. And it's not only themselves that actually, it's families, it's school fees, it's all these. I've tried it, right? Sitting there with a down data center, it's immense pressure. So for a service provider to deploy a new technology that they haven't tested, and maybe even like ours that is only a year or something old, it requires the provider to have a deep understanding of the responsibility that these service providers have. And I think if you are coming from an enterprise scene, maybe you don't feel it the same way as we do. We've all been there. I've had a bed, phone next to my bed for most of my professional life because I've been running services and data center uptime and latency and packet, all that stuff has been James and I at least, and I guess to some extent also yours, sort of eat, sleep, and drink kind of situation for many, many years, right? And when we built hosted AI, we've done it with that in mind, ensuring there is redundancy across all important parts of the infrastructure, ensuring that there is a level of sustainability in the services that we provide. Yeah. And the funny thing is, and I can talk about this for a long time because it's one of my pet peeves, right? If you look at the uptime across the neoclouds of today, and some of these guys actually provide that data, and Vast AI, one of the marketplaces out there, is very good at actually showing this for all the 250 offerings they have. Average uptime is just below 99%. And 99% to the untrained eye might seem, oh, that's a lot, that's almost 100%, but it's more than 7 hours downtime every month.
Wow.
And if in our days as a service provider, if we had 7 hours down, we would be out of business in a heartbeat. But this is the true uptime of the neoclouds of today. Some of them substantially lower than that, actually. So we built a platform that enables service providers to enter this AI wave, but do it with an inherently sustainable and redundant infrastructure. So we think uptime throughout everything we do. And I think that's a key difference, again, if you come from a Bitcoin mining background or if you come from an enterprise background, that you don't have that mindset because you haven't slept with a phone next to your bed, right? So.
I was about to ask this question to you, Ditlev, in terms of, why does the end consumer care about, service, like as long as they're getting GPUs from anywhere, right? But I think you've answered it quite well, right? But
I guess that's one thing, right? The second thing is that you're paying way too much for it. Yeah. Because if a service provider has to make his business model work with the financial engineering issue that Naren describes super well, but also with the fact that you're only selling 20% of the GPU you bought. So what we are doing now, we are enabling a service provider to say, hey, if Naren buys a GPU and James buys the GPU, and if Naren is not using his, then James can tap into it. Or you can introduce a third client to use whatever Naren and James is not using without Naren and James being impacted. So that is how the whole industry works. It's not something we've invented. It's just for some reason, when the GPU wave came, no one is doing it. So we're kind of just fixing that part of the industry. Probably the biggest opportunity our industry have seen so far has been launched with year 2000 kind of approach to it, which is crazy the way we see it, right? So as an end user, you care about two things. You care about having a really easy to use, sustainable, and solid infrastructure, but you also care about the price that is being offered at it. And without having a way to use or tap into unused capacity, the price will always be too high. And that is effectively, we think, what is holding back the industry. Is what holding back the AI wave is that the price is just too high. And if you look at it from the outside, only analysts and they say, hey, you got to buy more GPUs, you got to buy the latest and greatest type of GPUs. But effectively, why buy more? They're all just sitting there with 80% spare capacity. Yeah. So what we have built is it's a technology for you to go and utilize that spare capacity before you start buying more GPUs.
Yeah.
And just like you do for CPU, just like you do for storage, just like you do for memory, it's the same principles. We've just added it to the GPU because no one else has. It's quite puzzling to think about it.
Yeah, it changes the whole economics.
Yeah, completely.
Right.
And in the last few days, Ditlev and I have been spending some time trying to understand also power consumption. It's at some point, there's not going to be enough power to power all the GPUs in the world. And we're actually not very far from that. And what we learned yesterday was a B200, the latest, the latest, greatest of the GPUs, even when it's being unutilized, at 0% utilization, it consumes 140 watts.
One card. Yeah.
One card. And a system, usually a server has like 8 cards. So you're talking like 140 times 8, which is like 1000 watts, one kilowatt, just for zero consumption. So if like most of the GPU infrastructure around the world is lying like 20%, 30% utilized, we clearly are also at a point where I think power is also going to start dictating much better utilization of these cards. In fact, we'll probably put an article on that on LinkedIn soon, because I think that actually is a real economic driver for better utilization as well worldwide.
I think that would be a fun thing to track, the carbon footprint of underutilized GPUs.
And also, because we, as a company, we sell to customers worldwide. We actually, thanks to OnApp, we had about 3,000 customers in 93 countries. A lot of them, right, are actually wanting to enter the AI wave. And, we talk to customers in, like, say, Caribbean and other places. Power is a real issue. Like, in fact, to run, like, say, a 36 B200 nodes, which is, it's a sizable infrastructure. So they actually look at it and say, I probably need to spread this across 6 countries so that it's manageable. So yeah, that's another thing that I think will be a big tailwind for us as we move into this AI era.
I want to wrap with one question for all of you. Naren, is there anything that keeps you up at night in terms of when you look at the future? Of course there are a lot to be thankful about, and of course the kind of team and the kind of product that we have built. But is there anything that you also feel what's the cloud inside the silver lining? Talk us through that.
His world doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So, not exaggerating, but at some level, the technology that we are building is super complex, and the technological landscape is also evolving every day. So, and like what Ditlev said, we are basically catering to service providers who have thousands, if not tens of thousands of end enterprises as their clients, right? So, yeah, having a product that's up and running, and we're able to deliver whatever we promised. I think that's, and we've been lucky to actually get a few good customers initially, and we've been having a lot of deployments worldwide. And yeah, so scaling this from like where we are today as a startup into thousands of customers, definitely that keeps me up at night.
Because you can see, compared to OnApp that we built together,
yeah,
where we had a competitive situation that frankly made sales sometimes a little bit hard.
Mm-hmm.
Selling hosted AI is not hard.
It's not hard, yeah.
That is easy.
Yeah.
And we raised a ton of capital for OnApp, like 20-something million. And that was really tough.
Mm-hmm.
That was like half my life back then. Raising money for hosted AI has not been hard. It's been easy.
So in fact, every single conversation is inbound pretty much. Like
so the two main challenges of all startups that I have, this is my seventh, I've tried this, it's not my first rodeo. The main challenges have not been challenges here.
Yeah.
So, and the reason probably is that it's super hard to do, and there's probably, and you're going to be impossible afterwards, but there's probably like a handful of guys like Julian in the world, right, that can pull this off.
Yeah.
And that is why we have a real go at it, right? And that's why we feel we can solve a challenge that is, frankly, to most companies out there, unsolvable.
Yeah. When I try to explain virtualization to people, I try to dump. I'm not as eloquent as Julian at explaining virtualization. I try to dumb it down for people. I say, imagine you have like tens of thousands of CPUs running parallelly, and you need to virtualize that whole thing at line speed. How hard would that be? That's the problem you're solving. It's hard. It's very hard, and that definitely keeps me up. So, James?
Okay, so I think the thing that keeps me up at night is, and it kind of tails off of that, is that Julian and the team are building great great solutions from the very technical perspective, right? So we are solving really hard problems. We are doing things that we didn't even know that we were going to be able to do with regards to the GPU and scheduling, and but now somehow we need to take all of this cool stuff and productize it, turn it into something that actually an end user can feel the benefit of, or the service provider can feel the benefit of. And sometimes only one of those parties needs to see and feel and know about this, right? So making sure that a service provider can bill for cool new features that we might be able to enable onto a GPU pool, or to make sure that they have the flexibility to be able to build in the way that they want to bill, or to be able to make sure that customers can enable and disable certain features and functionality on the fly as they wish, while the service provider still has all of the control that they need. There's a lot of factors that we have to bring in here, and The easy way is just to make everything a configurable option and just fill the UI with all kinds of switches and toggles and enable this and enable that. But we can't do that. We need to stay true to the keeping this product as something that is simple and easy to use. So service providers really can just pick it up and be up and running within days and having a service offering that they're taking to market. We never want to have a services fee associated with getting up and running with our products, right? We want to make sure that they're just things you can pick up and you can take them to market. Service providers, they're doing a lot of things. They always have many things to worry about. And if you make bringing a new product into their landscape super complicated, you'll never get there. It needs to be straightforward. It needs to be something that just kind of rolls in and just works. If it doesn't just work, then that's going to be an absolute barrier to moving forward. So
Simplifying the complexity.
Absolutely. Yeah, the whole journey and the interaction with the service, right? From support perspective as well. Service providers are amazing because they have these super smart people that get super deep into everything that they work with, right? So they don't want to kind of bother their vendors with questions about how do I do this and how do I do that. Typically, the technical staff go as deep as they possibly can, but sometimes they need to reach support and they need to know that support team is there 24/7 and backs off their SLAs and all that kind of stuff. So all those things are the things that kind of keep me up at night, and that I'm really kind of focused on making sure that we deliver.
Yeah, for me, what keeps me up at night is coding, debugging. But I love it. That's not a stressful thing for me. That's, it's the excitement.
I mean, it's a super interesting time, right? Because we are literally at this inflection. Sometimes I compare it to building the new internet, where this is like, I think, the third or fourth version of whatever. But when you built the first one, you kind of had to invent, TCP/IP. You had to dig under cables, put cables underneath the oceans, and tie all the sort of parts of the world together and all that. And that was kind of the first version of the internet, and billions went into that. But clearly, the trillions came from the usage of the internet. And you can kind of compare that to the foundational models being built over the last 2-3 years. That's the underground cables. That's the TCP/IP of the new internet. And those models are being built now, and there's more coming out, and I think there'll be a lot of micro models and so on and so on. But that's the inflection point we're at right now, is that they're starting to become mature foundational models. Now the use of them, the inferencing, that's the point that's coming right now and almost doubling it on a monthly basis. And this is the time, and what keeps me up at night is that today 30% of the industry, so the hosting service provider industry, 30% of it comes from some sort of AI workload. But less than 5% of service providers actually have a single GPU in the data center. So there is a lot of catching up to do here. And that is frankly because I love the industry. I started my first service provider back in the 90s, doing BBS. You don't know what BBS is, but doing BBS and stuff like this back in the days, right? And I love the industry. I love the people in it. And it's a kind of a very close-knit little community. And I just hate to see these guys failing here. So there is some catching up to do, and that's what kind of keeps me up. We have the technology to do this, but again, it's not only about us. It's also about buying the GPUs and finding a way to finance them, and we have some great things on the way there as well, or finding partners that have spare cycles that they can consume and so on and so on. But there is really some catching up to do, and you can there is a window here. It's probably a few years more. It's not like tomorrow.
A few years.
But there is a windows of a few years that if this number of 5% doesn't increase quite dramatically over the next sort of 2-3 years, it might be the time where this industry actually changes in a sort of fundamental structure, where it actually consolidates. Because if you think back at this, the internet was not built by 5 giants. It was built by thousands of service providers. And that is potentially the change that's going to happen now, unless we succeed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because this is kind of our raison d'etre, is to make sure that service providers can deploy profitable and easy to use AI infrastructure. You can orchestrate, you can sell it, you can make money from it. That's what we do. And if we don't manage to sell that and spread that wide enough, then this could be the time where the fundamental industry will unfortunately change.
Oh, very well said. I have just one last question on hosted.ai as an org, right? And I know we have a lot of plans about, so far, we are a remote workforce, and I think that's also, there are a lot of elements in it which are by design. that we want to really build a truly diverse team that can cater to, demand coming from anywhere in the world. But I also want to slightly understand your aspirations of building the org. I know that, there are some plans already in motion. And hopefully when we do this, again, the next time around on our second anniversary, we could look back to this one and say, oh, we had spoken about that then. So yeah, I would, maybe just go through, go across all of you, maybe 1-2 liners on hosted.ai as an org. What are you really looking for?
Our organization, you mean?
Yeah, as the people and culture and, all that we're trying to do, yeah.
I mean, our last 2 startups, we ended up being a few hundred people in each of them. UK2 a little bit more. At OnApp, I think at our height, we were just above 200 people. One of my inspirations is for that not to happen again. I would like to keep it lean. I would like to be max 50 people. I know it will be famous last words because James is building a support team. Obviously, that has to be 24/7, and we have to be really good at support. That requires a lot of hands. We don't think AI is quite there yet. But a lean organization. So that's seen from the outside. From the inside, I mean, we've run this before. We've tried this before, and I think transparency. Having a flat, transparent organization where everyone understands what everyone is doing, and where we're kind of not just code monkeys, but actually we are solving serious problems. No one feels like they are an outsourced part of an organization. No one feels that they are solving a specific little niche of a larger problem. Everyone is sort of heading towards the same. And this is basically what we've spoken about for the last hour. Everyone needs to feel that deep inside of them, that this is the problem we're solving. And if we're not solving it, then there will be a dent in the market. It will literally change. Yeah. And I think it's very important for us. And we've managed to do that in the last few startups that actually have everyone in the same team here. Everyone to understand that, hey, this is why we're here. This is what we're doing. And if we don't do it, something serious will happen.
Yeah. One more data point on the dent in the market. I mean, it's when people think service providers, in fact, I think when we spoke to a lot of our VCs, people are like, oh, what are these service providers, right? Turns out, when you use the word cloud, everyone thinks it's the hyperscalers, AWS, Google, Microsoft. They're only 60% of the market. 55 even, yeah. The remaining 45% of the market is these, let's call them tier 1.5, tier 2, tier 3 service providers. So it's a huge industry, right? Mm-hmm. And as the world is moving from CPUs into GPUs, of course, both will coexist for some time. If they're not empowered to actually bring GPUs into their infrastructure and offer them to their customers, it really will be the dent that Ditlev's talking about. So,
but good. I think it's been great chatting. I think for any of you seeing out there, and if you have any inputs or if you want to reach out to any of us, we'll drop our email IDs in the show description below, or just reach out to us at hello@hosted.ai. We look forward to listening from you, and yeah, I think that's a wrap. Thanks, guys. Thanks again.